Discover how to maximize your chances of getting pregnant. Wanting to get pregnant is just the first step in a long road that lies ahead of you. For some, things fall into place rather easily, especially the pregnancy itself. In fact, some people have trouble not getting pregnant. All that you need is to approach it in the right way, so that your chances of getting pregnant are really maximized, and this means developing an understanding of pregnancy itself, and dealing with the factors that are behind it. Over the course of this guide, we're going to go through a comprehensive discovery process of many different things that you can do to help maximize your chances of getting pregnant. By giving you all the know-how, you should not only have a better understanding of pregnancy itself, but you also should be able to get out there and start doing something about getting pregnant, almost immediately. Brief introduction to conception. Naturally, you know by now that pregnancy is the process by which women carry children to term, and then deliver them. Yes, that's right, children are born, not brought over by storks during the night. However, seeing as the focal point of this entire guide is about how to actually get pregnant, what we're interested in is what actually goes on to cause pregnancy, and this is, as you may have guessed, known as conception. And yes, sex is precisely the process by which the sperm is inserted into the female body, before it journeys to the womb and causes conception. Although all of this is fairly basic stuff, you might have guessed by now that there is really a lot more to conception than just this. After all, if it was just a question of having sex, then there'd be no issue at all. That is one of the key prerequisites for any pregnancy to occur. A woman needs to actually be at a stage of her menstrual cycle where an egg has been released and is ready for fertilization. Otherwise, it simply cannot happen. On top of that, at certain points, the chances of fertilization are vastly increased, meaning that your chances of getting pregnant would be best at certain times. Without getting too medical, it would be best if you think of it this way: for some reasons, the sperm might not be able to get into the egg in order to form the union that it needs to. End of the day, you now have a rough enough idea of what conception entails. By this point, you probably even have pinpointed at least one of the topics that is going to form a big portion of what this guide is about. Preparation to increase the chances of conception. Knowing as you now do, and probably already did, that both men and women have roles to play in a successful pregnancy, it makes sense that there are specific items in terms of preparation that each should undertake. Bear in mind that these are, as mentioned, the sort of things that should be done as quickly as possible. Admittedly, we haven't really discussed these in depth, but they're the kind of thing that you'll become very accustomed to as we go along. Plus, to discuss them in a lot of detail would mean getting very technical, and unless you want a crash course in biology, it's best that we steer clear of that for now. Anyway, to kick things off, let's look at the preparation that women should undertake to initially boost their chances of conception. Don't worry if your grasp on fertility isn't entirely firm yet, we'll be covering it in greater depth later. For now, here's some of the steps that you should be starting to carry out. 1. Stop all forms of birth control. Sure, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the very first thing that you need to do is to stop any birth control measures that you may be on. Consult a doctor or pharmacist if you need any further advice regarding the specific type of birth control that you're on. And don't worry, if you're just on the pill, as most people are, it isn't going to affect your chances of getting pregnant once you stop. Once you've dealt with your birth control, you've taken the first firm step toward getting pregnant. Basically, if you can, try to both avoid stressful situations as much as possible, and learn how to relax yourself in those unavoidable times when you will inevitably get stressed. Some techniques, such as meditation, massages, and the like, are certainly good ways to get started. Of course, simply taking deep breaths and trying to calm yourself is just as good, provided you're the sort of person for whom that suffices. Quit smoking. Despite the fact that it is easier said than done, quitting smoking is without a doubt the best thing that you could do. For a woman, the risks that smoking presents in terms of pregnancy are numerous and fearsome. Firstly, Not only does it affect a woman's general fertility, but smoking has also been shown to dramatically increase the chances of miscarriages occurring. Also, there is a big risk of them being born prematurely, which in itself can carry a lot of other risks along with it. Studies have also gone to show that these children often end up suffering from various effects that are tied in with secondhand smoke. Some of these effects include things such as asthma, bronchitis, and even, in some bad cases, cancer. Today, there are many aids that can help you do so, from nicotine patches, right on to inhalers, and other aids. Most doctors would readily be able to assist you with any further advice. 4. Data has displayed that women who are their ideal weight get pregnant more easily than their fellows who are either under or overweight. If you need to lose weight, then you might want to do so through exercise combined with a diet, rather than just a diet alone. Overall, the benefits of exercising are great, and so you should take full advantage of them. But there are some things that do. Preparation for men. From what you already know about fertilization, the role of the man is to provide sperm that are strong enough to reach and penetrate, and thus fertilize, the female's egg. With this in mind, it shouldn't be too much of a leap to realize that any and all preparation that you undertake needs to be centered on that core idea, ensuring that your sperm is of enough strength to do what needs to be done. Of course, it isn't that simple. So, apart from just strengthening your sperm, increasing the number that is unleashed would be equally beneficial to your chances. This number is referred to as the sperm count. Let's look at what you should be starting to do. 1. Furthermore, even secondhand smoke from a man can cause a woman to face all the effects of smoking itself, which just continues to compound the situation. Bear in mind that this works vice versa too, i.e. So quit smoking, quickly. 2. Get sufficient vitamins and minerals. Depending on how balanced your diet is, you may or may not have problems in this regard. So long as you're getting the nutrients somehow, you should be fine. 3. Dodge toxins, and stop recreational drug use. Overall, toxins and recreational drugs have a very adverse effect on sperm in men, both in terms of the sperm count and their strength. Constant exposure to such things can cause other problems too. Keep this in mind, and try, as much as humanly possible, to limit your exposure to both these things. 4. Anything and everything that could expose you to high temperatures should be avoided. 5. Exercise in moderation. In essence, the amount of exercise that you should be aiming for is something along the lines of enough, but not too much. Basically, keep it in moderation, and you should be able to enjoy the benefits of exercising, without its potential ill effects. Start to try to put these preparatory efforts into action as soon as possible. As you've noticed, some of them will need working on, but at the end of the day, the rewards are certainly worth the effort that you put in. Just to quickly recap and reassert what you know though, here's the lowdown. Every month, an egg is, invariably, released, and this is called ovulation. As the egg travels down the fallopian tube, it is then the ideal time for fertilization to occur. However, this is, unfortunately, not a process that is very easily timed. First though, you should know roughly how your cycle works in the first place. Charting and recording ovulation cycles. Okay, although this isn't the most reliable way of determining when you're most fertile, it is still a good starting point. Generally, if you have a regular 28-day cycle, your ovulation is most likely going to begin 14 days after the day your last period began. Then, pick the shortest one and subtract 18 from the number of days that it lasted. When your next period begins, add this amount of days and track that point in time. For a week following that tracked point, you should be at your most fertile. That means, in this case, that it should be taken immediately after you wake up, and before you carry out any sort of physical activity. To do so, you'll need more than just a regular thermometer. Specialized basal thermometers are commonly sold, and these are going to be far more precise than the regular variety, which is what you need because the temperature difference that you're tracking is less than a degree. 8 degrees Fahrenheit. So, by keeping track of the basal body temperature, you can pinpoint the exact point at which ovulation occurs. In order for this to be most effective, you need to keep track of your basal body temperature over the span of 2 or more periods. Once you've noticed the increase, and noted it, over the span of a few periods, you should be able to then predict when your ovulation is going to occur. After that, simply look to the 2 or 3 days prior to that temperature increase, and mark these down as your most fertile days. Simple, isn't it? At various times, you most likely have noticed that your underwear was damp. In reality, this dampness is caused by cervical mucus, which will alter and be discharged to help sperm move towards the egg when you are most fertile. Keep this in mind because it means that once you notice it, that's your most fertile point. Eventually though, it will change, and spotting this change is what you need to accomplish. By regularly checking your cervical fluid, either every day, or better yet, every time you visit the bathroom, you could record what you notice onto a chart, possibly even the same one that you use to record basal temperatures. Following this, you should be able to further regularly pinpoint your most fertile point, and use this information to your advantage. Also, any and all judgment of cervical fluid is bound to be fairly subjective, so it may take some time before you can actually start to know for certain that you're noticing the right thing. Coupled with the changes that you notice in your basal temperature though, you should be able to, by this point, somewhat accurately pinpoint the times at which you're most fertile. Alternative measures for fertility prediction. If, after everything we've covered, you find that you still have issues predicting exactly when you're most fertile, don't despair. By testing for the presence of these hormones, it is actually possible to identify the time of ovulation, or even the period leading up to it. Almost all over-the-counter prediction kits work in roughly the same way, and involve testing urine samples for hints of increased hormone production. However, it is strongly recommended that you take a look at the instructions of the specific type of predictor kit that you're using, so that you're able to get accurate results. Don't make this mistake, and you should find that prediction kits are a true asset to have on your side. Well, now that you know how to predict the most fertile point, you're almost there in terms of knowing the best ways to increase your chances of a pregnancy. But before we're quite done, you should know how to actually take advantage of this most fertile point. Taking full advantage of fertility. Being able to measure and predict, and therefore plan for, exactly when you're going to be most fertile is great, but taking advantage of that knowledge is very much necessary if you want to get pregnant. Sometimes, there needs to be other measures taken in tandem, to further increase your chances. Here and now, we're going to walk you through some of the steps that you should be taking in order to make the most of all the planning that you've done. Think of these steps as the sort of things that could prove to tip the scale of chance in your favor. Keeping that in mind, you should know that there are several things you should also know about sex to ensure that you get the best results. None of these tips are really very out of the ordinary, but they will each boost your chances a little, and in tandem, work together to help you to get pregnant. Take a glance through the following. 1. Despite the fact that you should have pinpointed the most fertile part of your cycle, trying to just hit that one target alone is, really, ill-advised. After all, if you happen to be off by even a little bit, you'll end up both being too late or too early, and thus all your efforts will amount to nothing. On the other hand, if you're having sex regularly over that period, your chances of hitting the target are actually much improved. One reason that many couples who are trying to conceive actually end up having less sex than they should is the folktale that it will lower a man's sperm count if he has too much sex. This is, as mentioned, just a folktale. In reality, having regular sex is not going to affect any man's sperm count much, unless he has some pre-existing condition that makes it so. Essentially, having sex regularly is definitely the way to go. 2. Stay off artificial lubricants. Many people don't know this yet, but artificial lubricants have been found to be toxic to sperm, and can definitely hinder your chances of getting pregnant. Bottom line, as far as possible, stay off any artificial lubricants. If you really do need some form of lubrication, then try using warm water, which won't interfere with the sperm's ability to reach the cervical mucus. Or, as a final resort, just using a very, very small amount of KY jelly mixed with water should not have too big an adverse effect. Choosing the right position. Don't get confused. You can get pregnant if you have sex in practically any position that you like, but some positions have been shown to increase your chances slightly, and that could make all the difference. In a nutshell, positions that require the sperm to defy gravity and swim upstream, so to speak, such as sitting, standing, or with the woman on top, are definitely the sort of thing that you should avoid. On the other hand, the simplicity of the missionary position is definitely something that helps out. Don't use a douche after sex. Honestly, this really is just common sense, but using a douche after sex is going to negatively impact your chances. Douching will inevitably alter the pH, acidity and alkalinity levels of the vagina, and thus, as you already know, could end up killing sperm. Furthermore, any cervical mucus might be flushed out, which is what helps sperm to travel to the uterus. Keep sex fun. Now, one of the key things that many people often end up forgetting in their quest to get pregnant is to simply have fun. Sex is meant to be fun, and you should definitely try to keep it that way. If you get too serious, stressed out, or tense about getting pregnant, then you're going to end up finding that sex is less fun, and more of a chore. Try new things, and be sure to take into account the needs of your partner, so that both of you end up having a great time. Should you be able to keep sex fun, and carry it out as often as possible, you'll find that you will probably have little or no problem getting pregnant. All of these sexual-related tips form the core of your efforts to get pregnant. Now, we're in the final lap, and it's time that we go over a few last efforts that can, and should, be undertaken. Bear in mind that these are no less important than anything else that we've discussed so far. Some of these tips are the sort of thing that we've already covered, but should definitely be reiterated, as you'll see. 1. If you can, try to cut out any caffeine from your diet as much as possible. 2. Cut out smoking, recreational drugs, and alcohol. Already, we've discussed why smoking and recreational drugs are bad, and it should come as no surprise to you that alcohol is just as bad. 3. Take folic acid. Folic acid, or rather, vitamin B9, is a vitamin that is known to help pregnancy, and play a role in a baby's development. Although it isn't directly linked to conception, it is something that you should be thinking of doing, at very least. Final words, if all else fails. Over the course of this guide, we've covered practically everything that you need to know about getting pregnant. With the knowledge that you now have, you should be able to dramatically improve your chances of doing so. However, sometimes that just isn't enough. Don't give up hope though, and certainly, don't resort to that until you've tried what we've taught you. Despite the fact that these measures may not be effective in some cases, in most cases they really are, as many people who have trouble conceiving really just aren't going about things in the most effective manner. Already, you should have possibly seen some areas in which you could improve, so go out there and get to it.